Hey guys, and welcome to episode 104 of Meeple to Meeple. This week's episode is From Moves to Mastery. We're going to be talking with Nick Bentley from Underdog Games. And as always, I remain PJ.
I am Gareth.
Yeah, how are you? Gareth, how are you?
I'm good. I've managed to do about eight episodes in a row without not being here.
I know.
That in itself, it's a miracle.
How was your Halloween? We just passed Halloween. How was your celebration?
I went to a gig.
You did?
I went to see a band that no one's really heard about called Public Service Broadcasting. Check them out. Fantastic. But that was my Halloween.
Excellent.
So there was no pumpkins. We did decorate this. We did put a few decorations up inside the house.
I am desperately trying to get the kids in our neighborhood to refer to our house as the Ghostbusters house because all of our decorations are Ghostbusters themed and we dress as Ghostbusters.
Is your decoration still up?
No, we took them down.
Yeah.
We took them down. Yeah, we took them down Friday, and Christmas will come up probably the day after Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Well done.
So there you go. But I guess that's enough about us. Let us introduce our guest. He has been kind enough to come on and just kind of blindsided him. And it's Nick Bentley. Nick, how are you?
Hi, guys. I'm great. This is awesome. I love talking on podcasts.
Well, we're glad to have you here, and thank you again. I know I just kind of reached out to you blindly. We had no correspondence or anything beforehand when I reached out to you, but as one of the Underdog advisors, I get the emails, and this topic was really interesting, and I'm like, we need to get you on, and here you are. So I'm glad we were able to make this happen. So Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into the modern gaming hobby, and then a little bit more about your position role at Underdog.
Sure. So yeah, in the early 2000s, I was working on a PhD, and I was not doing all the work I should to complete my PhD. I was definitely dilly-dallying, and one of the ways that I dilly-dallied was I started playing games with a roommate also in the same PhD program, also not working very hard. And so we started playing a lot of games, and I became enchanted with them. I remember the first two games I discovered that just totally threw me for a loop were Acquire by Sid Saxon and Hex by John Nash, which is not something a lot of people come into the hobby through, but I did. And that actually spawned a sort of lifelong love of austere, minimal, but deep abstract games. And I actually designed those for a decade before I did anything else. And at one point I started writing a blog around 2010-ish, back when blogs were the main way that people communicated about stuff online. And but I wasn't writing about games themselves. I was writing about the industry because I was amazed that there was an industry. And some industry people started reading my blog, and I eventually got a job offer through it, and I started working in the industry in 2014, and I have been since.
That's awesome. Wow.
And what was your first role? How did you get
My first role was a convention coordinator for North Star Games.
Yeah.
And then a lot of what I've been doing since then is marketing, and then as time has gone on, I've become more and more of a game designer and a product creator. And as that time has gone on, I've realized that's where my real skill lies. I'm actually not as good at most of the other stuff that I've been asked to do. Yeah.
It's quite useful because those things that people ask, how do you get into the industry? I guess you're either going in as a designer or as a publisher, but a lot of people do start by conventions and just helping out.
Yeah, although the way that I get in was really writing, which is unusual. Right. And I tell people this is a really undervalued way to get in. When most people write, they write toward the end customer. But if you write toward the people who are making the things, you don't have much competition because not many people do talk to those people. And there's only a few of them, There's 100 people in the whole world who could be your only readers. But those are the readers that can hire you. So just write to them.
Yeah. So there's a top tip for anyone listening as well.
That's great. That's fantastic. So you had wrote a blog that you sent out, and it was in regards to second edition of Trekking the World, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's the game that we're working on publishing right now.
And so you're trying to, if I understand correctly, you're trying to make Trekking the World still engaging for hobbyists like ourselves, but also open to family members.
Yeah.
And it brought a light on this concept of emergent qualities and different strategies in board games. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have a long history with Emergence because it's probably my favorite thing about games.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is if you really try to get good at a good game, a good strategy game, typically the game that you'll find yourself playing on the 100th play doesn't really feel anything like what you were playing on the first play because your understanding of it has changed so much. You have a matrix of associations around the game in your head that changes your perception of it. And so in some way, I feel like the original legacy game is a game that's emergent, right? Like chess or Go or something like that. But I also have a fraught relationship with it because in publishing games, I don't think Emergence has ever been a big selling point. First of all, because you can't demonstrate it in any kind of marketing materials.
Right.
And second, because as time has gone on, and the number of published games rises every year, there are going to be 5,000 brand new games every year. People don't give games enough plays to discover whatever emergence is there. So it's become less and less important.
Right.
But it is, if you're trying to make a game that works for families, but also is not boring to gamers, I think Emergence still does have a role because it creates a situation where families won't be intimidated by the things they can't see on their first play. But someone who's more sophisticated may start seeing those things. And they'll be like, oh, this is more interesting than it looks on the surface. And then you get people enjoying the game on two different levels. That's the idea. There are pitfalls. Yeah.
I think when PJ sent me your email with the emergent quantities, I had to really, I didn't even know what it meant when it first started. I said, what's emergence actually mean? So I also read the email, read it through. I then started to think of the games. And I've been hobby properly since about 2012. And so the speed, as you say, of games coming out, there's quite a few games that I'm sure I've played more recently that we've just never got back more than 2 or 3 times and missing out on the quality of what you learn. So it's really made me think of some examples we've got over time, which we'll cover, I guess, in a bit.
Yeah.
I think you succinctly described this situation. I want to quote from your blog that you had sent out, and I just thought this was brilliant. More than any other art form, what you get out of a strategy game depends on what you put in. But this is increasingly at odds with the culture of games because there are so many coming out. How do you see that continuing in the future and impacting the sense of emergence?
Yeah, or the value of emergence. How does it impact the value?
Yeah.
I mean, I think for games, there's always every year or every 2 years, there's some game that kind of shoots up the zeitgeist among hobbyists. And for games like that, then I think emergence really does matter for them because there's going to be a significant group of people who play that game to the hilt. And if they don't feel the experience becoming richer as they play, they'll abandon it for the next thing. So the gateway to evergreenness for games like that requires, I think, some emergence. The difficulty for most games is that they're not that, right? We said 5,000 games are going to be published this year, 1 or 2 of them. Maybe this year it will be Harmonies and Duel for Middle-earth. Those are the 2 games that seem to have really shot up the flagpole so far this year. But for the rest of us, it's it's not clear that designing emergence is automatically a good thing to do, or at least spending much time on it, because there are opportunity costs. Every little bit of design work you put into creating more emergence is design work you're not putting into creating that first play experience. And that first play experience, because so many people, like, if they don't have a great first play experience, they're just done with the game forever, you know? You really have to pay attention to that as a modern publisher.
Have you found
so I overall, to answer your question, I think the value of emergence is going to be shrouded or, like, kind of like decimated a little bit going forward.
Is there a way for a designer to outline how much emergence there is? I guess you've got heaviness, which is, I guess, that strategic complexity from light to heavy, but could you have shallow to deep?
Yeah, I actually think there's things that get confused in this discussion. So we talk about heaviness, and the way that a lot of hobbyists talk about heaviness, they sort of use rules complexity as a proxy for like strategic depth, but it is not at all a proxy of strategic depth. There are games with lots and lots of rules where you can't actually accrue all that much skill.
Yeah.
And there are games with very few rules, like Go, famously, where this, like, no one has ever found the skill ceiling, despite, like, I mean, Go has been around for thousands of years. There used to be countrywide university system in China for Go for hundreds of years. No one ever found the ceiling on that game, And for me, that's magical.
Yeah, it's when you pick up a game knowing that maybe this is going to take a bit more skill than just playing it once or twice.
Yeah. Another thing I'll say is that a lot of games that we don't think of as having much emergence actually have much more emergence than we realize. And the reason is that it takes work to find it. So, like, if I tell you to go on Board Game Arena, the big site where people play board games online, and play the top-ranked Carcassonne player, see what happens, right? He'll run circles around you, and you won't know how. And the reason you won't know how is because he sees the game in a way that you can't see it,
Right.
And that's true of a lot of games, but we're totally unaware of it.
And on the games that you're involved with, is it a common topic for a design process?
So, no, it's actually not. And I think because it's not something that, like, a publisher knows how to sell. Like, if I tell you, hey, I designed this really deep game, most people's first reaction is, yeah, whatever. Everybody wants to say that, Prove it. I don't know how to prove it. You have to play it 100 times. I'm not going to play it 100 times, So, yeah. But as a game designer who I feel a lot of passion, I want to be able to take great pride in what we're making. I want it in there.
Right.
I want people to be the few people who go to the trouble of really digging around in there and seeing what's in there. I want them to be like, oh, whoa, that's surprising.
What do you think
it's really
about?
Making me think about my own gameplay. Yeah.
What do you think about tournaments, and in particular the World Series of Gaming that's held out in Vegas? I think it is. Because you were talking about the top Carcassonne player, right? And what makes that top Carcassonne player so good is experience and immersing oneself in the strategies. And so I'm wondering about tournaments and the World Series of Gaming. And do you think that might? Yeah. Tell me, what do you think about that?
I love them. I love them because they show people that there's more to games, and they put an emphasis on that. Like, I just had sort of an experience related to this game we're about to release, Trekking the World 2nd edition, related to this. So the Dice Tower got a pre-production copy of the game, and for their Winter Spectacular, they did a playthrough. And it was everybody's first game. But 3 of the people at the table were Dice Tower regulars. And one of them was the world champion Cascadia player from the World Board Game Championships, or one of those big tournaments.
Right.
And he absolutely smoked them, right? And I thought that was so cool because he could see some things that I could see the other people at the table weren't seeing. And because the game has very light rules, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
it feels like a family game when you first play it, or close to it, a gateway game, you might not assume it's there. So I was like really happy that like that player was at the table, and he was at the table because he had won. You know, he was a champion player,
Right.
and people could be like, oh, okay, well, I guess there's some stuff in here.
I just think that's great. I have up until this point been very reticent about these tournaments. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I mean, it's been at games are competitive enough already, and I feel like it's like too much like sports, and I'm not much of a sports fan. But then hearing you talk about it is like, okay, there is value to these tournaments, to the World Series of Gaming. I can see that. I see the value, and how do we balance maintaining a game that's open for family members, that's going to attract a broad audience, but yet still have that level of immersive quality to it. And you do talk about that a bit in your blog as well. You had brought up debating possible strategy guides and things like that. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine a couple of ways to try to make a game that has some skill in it still work for families. Like one way is to just try to bring everybody up to speed on strategy quickly. I don't know if that's a good idea, because like just knowing strategy is not the same thing as executing it. So you might not be able to bring people up to speed enough just by saying like, hey, here's something you can do,
Right.
So that's one thing. Recently, Richard Garfield has thought a lot about this problem, and he's mentioned two different approaches that I like to talk about.
Okay.
One is that we have a habitual way of thinking of like luck and skill as opposites. But they are not. You can have a game which is high luck and high skill. You can have a game which is low luck and low skill, and you can have mixtures of the two. So like he has this toy example, which I think is really great. It's a bad game, but it illustrates his point perfectly. So imagine you're going to play a game called Rando Chess. Rando Chess is exactly the same thing as chess, except at the end of the game, you roll a die. And if the person who won so let's say if it comes up 1 through 4, the person who won the game of chess wins the game of Rando Chess. And if it comes up 5 or 6, the person who lost the game of chess wins the game of Rando Chess. The game of Rando Chess has all the skill that chess has, but there's more luck in the outcome. Now, you would never want to play that game, right? But if you mix luck and skill into games in a more subtle way, you can do it. I mean, poker is an example of a high skill, high chance game, and it's a beloved game. So I think that's really important. That can be done. And I actually think like his game King of Tokyo is a little bit like that. I think there's more skill in there than people have really imagined. Or at least a little more skill than you're talking to the 2017 world champion King of Tokyo player, so I might be a little biased. But there's so many different little probabilistic edges you can think about in that game that you're not aware of at all unless you played a lot. And that's a Richard Garfield game, so I think that might be one of the games that he tried to realize this idea in.
How many times would you say you need to play a game just to uncover those layers?
I mean, it depends on the game. I mean, almost definitionally, you can't really know Emergence without getting there, whatever there is. There are things in Go that people who've played 2,000 times don't know. So different bits of Emergence come at different places in the experience curve.
So we've got a game, Architects of the West Kingdom. So it's a Shem Phillips game. Where my friend only believes there's one way to win, that's building cathedrals. And so we'll never play any other strategy apart from that. And we try to explain there's other routes through, but he's just adamant. And so it kind of ruins the game. But is that similar?
Yeah, I mean, I
people.
think there's a lot of hubris among hobbyists in general, which
Mm.
is that we think we understand a game
Yeah,
when we don't. I remember when I was working at North Star Games, I worked for Dominic Crapuchettes, who was once
yeah,
the fourth ranked Magic the Gathering player in the
that's
world.
right. Yeah,
In the world of strategy, he's known for the Evolution games.
that's right.
Yep.
And when Evolution first came out, I remember there was like a cacophony of people who were like, nah, there's really nothing to this game. This is easy or it's random or whatever. And he would challenge people who said that to games. And, invariably, I mean, he has a galaxy brain for game strategy, fourth ranked Magic Gathering player in the world.
Right.
He was like, the games were so like comically lopsided, right? But we tell ourselves these stories to make ourselves feel smart that we understand things when we don't. Now, about that Shem Phillips game, I've never played it, can't comment. Maybe he's right, maybe he's not. I don't know. But I know a lot of people who think they know don't. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I read other strategies, and there's different ways to play, so we always get an argument that maybe we should try something different. But
that thing that I said before about going online on where there's ranked play and then challenging
Right.
the best player, that is a great way to instantly disabuse yourself of what you know or don't know.
So what do you say? So I see more of the opposite. I mean, the hubris in the hobbyist exists, of course, but I see the opposite. I don't want to say that it's imposter syndrome, but there seems to be. I hear a lot of my friends say, "Yeah, I'm not really good at board games."
Yeah,
and they have 300 to 500 games in their collection in their basement, and I've said it myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the reason for me personally, I say I'm not good at board games is because my wife consistently abuses me by just wiping the floor with me at every game we play. She just happens to be smarter than me. So, that's why I married her. But, what do you say to that? So we've got this hubris, but we also have kind of this, well, I'm not really good at games too.
It keeps people away. The feeling that you're bad keeps people away from games, and that's really unfortunate.
Right.
It makes people hesitant to play. I mean, I think it's a difficulty of these things we make because they are even the simple ones are often these very complicated beasts. And each of us is like the proverbial like blind man feeling his way around the elephant. We think the elephant is a leg, we think the elephant is a trunk. But because of that, I mean, it is true that it often happens. There are people who are just naturally like they see a little more of the elephant,
right?
And that's enough. That's enough that they run circles around the rest of us. Actually, that reminds me of the second thing I was going to say about Richard Garfield.
Yeah.
Which was he recently wrote a post on Board Game Geek, reconceptualing the idea of a handicap. So, one theoretical way to even out a game is just say, we're gonna I'm gonna give you a little. If you're the weaker player, I'm gonna give you a little boost. We're gonna be even, and then now we're not sure who's gonna win. But there's a problem with that, in that, like, telling another player that they're handicapped is itself a feel bad.
Ooh, yeah.
And so you like feel a little bit ashamed just being on the supported end of a handicap.
Mm.
So I don't know if this will work, but he reconceptualized it by focusing on the stronger player and saying that the stronger player earns the right to go into hard mode. Right.
Okay.
Mathematically, it's the same thing, but like it's hard mode.
But psychologically, it's different, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I've been playing with the idea of hard mode, and I don't know, maybe it will work, maybe it won't. I have like this idea for a legacy game. I mentioned earlier that I thought like Emergence is the original form of legacy play.
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of make that real in a way. This could be a terrible idea, and maybe if some other designer listens to this, they'll figure out how to make it a good idea. But I'll share it. I want to make a game called like the Book of Secrets, and it will be a game that has a lot of emergence in it, and it will come with a book, and on every page there is some lesson about how to play well, and it's the best written strategy book that has ever been written. Like the amount of design work that would go into this book would be to the hilt. And then every time you lose the game, you get to peek into the secret book, and no one is ever allowed to look into the book otherwise. And it's not published online or anything like that. And so you have sort of legacy mechanics around learning, like actually happens in real emergent gameplay. There's an asymmetry in it. I don't know. Maybe not.
I think there's some rulebooks now that do come with a page of hints and tips, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
But this would be a dynamic adjustment. So you might have your hints and tips everyone has, but you say you learn something.
Yeah.
To either catch up or to. Yeah, I like the idea. I can see it's dynamic, though.
You can see how it might not work in practice, right? We talked earlier about how like learning a strategy isn't the same thing as executing a strategy. So unless this thing is written so well that it gets people to execute, it won't like have the catch-up effect that it should have. So
then you're back to whether you're an experienced gamer or newer gamer. So how you interpret that hint.
I'm thinking about Quacks of Quedlingberg, right? So the further you get, if you're in the lead, you get no bonus, right, as you start the next round. But then all the players behind you, depending on how many points behind they are, they get rat tails, which basically they get to start further along the track in their pot in front of them, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of what you're talking about. So what if we took that principle of, rather than the handicap for the people in last, the hard mode for that? How could you envision something like that in Quacks? If you're in the lead, what kind of hard mode? Like, how would you if you're familiar with the game, if you're not?
Oh, yeah, very much.
Okay, good.
So we're touching on the subject of catch-up mechanisms in games.
Right.
I have a lot of opinions about catch-up mechanisms,
okay,
including that I think I do not like Quacks' catch-up mechanism.
You do not like?
I do not like it.
Okay.
I think it is too. Okay, so the reason I think it, to at least some people, it feels cheap and unearned to catch up in that way. Because it's like, imagine playing football and the team that's behind just gets 2 points every 5 minutes until they're closer,
right,
or until they've caught up. It doesn't there was no agency involved in that, which is like not cool. I prefer mechanisms that are hidden. Referring to football, there actually is a catch-up mechanism, I think, in football. The closer you get to the end zone, the less space the defense has to cover to stop you. And so it creates more uncertainty of outcome when you hit the red zone than there would be if that wasn't true. So that's like this great hidden thing. But if the defense successfully stops an attack in the red zone, they had agency in doing that, and they feel good about having done that. They weren't just spotted points or anything like that. I like the ones that are hidden and that involve player agency to catch up, and I don't like the ones that are not hidden and that are just prescribed boost that doesn't involve the actions of the players.
Yeah, and I'm seeing more and more games where there's a catch-up mechanic.
Yeah,
I'm kind of with you on is this here just to balance things out? But actually, I want to earn the right to catch up.
Yeah, and the very best catch-up mechanisms, you won't know that they are there. You won't have any idea.
I've been sitting there thinking about your piece around hard mode, and I guess relating back to computer games. And actually, if I play on easy, medium, hard, or insane mode, that does feel much better than the handicap mode. Because actually, I'm just a normal player. And if I'm competing with somebody who may have played 20, 30 times, it does feel like I've got a bit of balance.
Yeah.
And
cool
there
idea.
are definitely games recently that I've seen that in, but I can't recall, where they've called it hard instead of, it's
That's
2
cool.
or 3. But it might go back to me.
That's cool.
So we've lost PJ on a power cut. So anyone who wonders where he's vanished to, he has as a massive storm has gone through and taken out the power. So we shall continue without PJ. What what other ways are there to, I guess, to bring emergence in? I did a little bit of research around, I guess, across Board Game Geek, where they talk about like enhanced tutorial systems. We've mentioned kind of the guidebook in the rulebook, right through to legacy. Is there anything that you find is one of the best ways to try and lift people, either through the game itself, through iconography, or through visual cues that you've learned?
I haven't found, I think, anything else that I've like definitively verified is a good way to do it. I have wondered if scenario structures could be a good way to do it. The game that was really popular last year, Sky Team.
Yeah.
I think it created a really good sort of scenario thing. The thing about scenarios is it will keep you playing for the time where you haven't discovered anything emergent. And in order to discover something emergent, you have to spend time with the game. So scenarios sort of keep you there. So maybe there could be something there.
The Sky Team adds, I guess I call that modules in, but extra rules.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of those first couple of games of playing Sky Team and missing the runway, and just, I guess, even just learning just to clear the planes and land on its own was a bit of skill.
Yeah. That said, I don't really know how much. I don't know how much Emergence is in Sky Team. I haven't played it enough to know. But just the general idea of using scenarios to keep you playing until you start to unravel whatever's underneath.
What about Ticket to Ride Legacy? Have you played?
Haven't played Ticket to Ride Legacy.
Because that's just rules upon rules upon rules.
Yeah. Ticket to Ride is a game that has quite a bit of emergence in it.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. Really skilled players are really skilled at that game.
Yeah, but the Legacy one, that feels more. It's just more things to think about. I was going through my recent plays, and again, I've never really thought about this. It's not until I read, I say PJ's note, but recently I played Keyflower, which I've played a lot. But we took lots of new friends twice over the last couple of games weekends, and then you sort of think actually people just see that game as placing tiles. But the more you play it, the more you've got the engine builder, you've got to get the right people behind your screen. But that does take quite a few plays to realise those intricacies in terms of the rules and the balance.
Yeah. The two biggest sources of emergence that I know of, and it's interesting because I think there's less of both of these things in games as time goes on, which I guess is sort of in keeping with my thesis. The two biggest sources of emergence are spatial gameplay. I mean, most of the most emergent games in history have like some spatial element. I think a lot of that has to do with like the amount of our brains given over to spatial computations, which sets the ceiling on what a human is capable of seeing in those games higher than for other kinds of representations. And then interactions between people, trying to anticipate what others will do and make decisions to capitalize on those predicted actions. That kind of predicting what humans will do is a complicated subject with a lot of layers, So, poker is an example of a game that's very deep because of that.
Again, thinking about Keyflower, that's got. Have you played Keyflower?
I have not.
No, so you got tile bidding, where you're trying to bid up to six players on different sides of the hex to win the tile to put in your village, and then you're also using meeples to put them on your village. So you got this dual use of, can I outbid that person? Can I use these meeples to my own advantage? I can also go and use the person's tile who's about to win it. So you've definitely got the spatial element of trying to see how people are going to play, but also knowing that if I go and put all my meeples out here to bid, I've lost them. If I keep them on my own environment, my own village, that I've got them for a later round. And that's what you get from a lot of plays.
Yeah, I've heard people say that the key games they have some depth to them.
Yeah, definitely. But again, I hadn't really, so until we started thinking about this, that you start to really consider how many games do I just churn through? Because I've had I've had a board game cull over the weekend and got rid of about 100 games.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, how many of those games were unplayed? Probably quite a few.
Yeah.
How many have only been played 2 or 3 times? But how many games have I just passed on that actually have got a lot more depth, but I just never given them the go?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting discussion.
It also raises the question, like, would you enjoy games more if you got to like that sort of point of seeing through the matrix a little bit, for one or a couple games, versus seeing the surface of 100 games, which is like how so many of us play these days.
Consume and play.
Yeah.
That's why I think there's that third axis on the depth or the shallowness of a game, or something that says, you really want to go and scratch this one a bit more than you've done. Because you're missing
what is
out,
it that tells you that?
I don't know. And that's
I would be a better game designer if I could consciously design that kind of signal in, rather than just luck into it or fail to luck into it in a design.
Do you like when you're doing game design? Is there any way you pick up this stuff from a play test? Do play testers still haven't tested it enough?
Now, play tests. It's very hard because you need like deeply longitudinal play testing to really get at this stuff. And so like play tests are actually a lot better for like that first play experience or early play experience. Now, I do like when I'm testing my games, one of the steps I take is I have a friend who is one of these sort of like galaxy brain players who wins all the tournaments, and I will take the game to him and then see if he can break it. And that's sort of a key step, because he's just one of these rare people that can like see 5 yards further into game dynamics than other people, and that's always an eye-opening experience.
So I guess it's there's not many of those sort of players around. So if they are, it's getting hold of them as part of your own gaming group.
Yeah.
Hello, PJ.
Hey, sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So what you're talking about really requires an individual with a singular mind that can see ahead, like, you were just talking about, and you don't know a lot of people like that, and and they're rare, and when you find them,
I've only met like, there's only been like 2 people who I've directly worked with who are like that kind of person, and it was working with them was invaluable in both cases.
But I think I've heard through conversations with other designers in the past, it's like when you get your play testers, you challenge them to break the game. They may not be that singular individual that we were talking about, but it's like you want to try to break that game, right? Like even as a play tester myself, I'm like, how can we break this? Because I think that's what best serves the designer. And a lot of play testers don't see that, and they're a little timid in the constructive criticism they give. So I appreciate that.
Certainly when trying to figure out if the game is structurally sound, that's like a necessary step for sure.
Yeah.
What's next in terms of so you got Trek in the World, which is the 2nd edition. When's that coming out?
So it's being fulfilled to Kickstarter backers now. It's mostly fulfilled to U.S. backers already, but it has not yet been fulfilled to international backers. So that in the next couple of weeks, it will be in Canadian backers' hands, and then over the course of the following month, it will be in international backers' hands. After that, we have a couple of small games definitely planned, which are they're kind of new for us. They're not like the things we've done before. One is a small, like 2-player travel game called High Tide by this designer who we found named Marceline Lehman. I don't like to talk about her because I want to like hoard her all to myself. But I don't know. Her name is getting out anyway, so cat's out of the bag. So do you guys know who Emerson Matsui is?
No.
I don't think so.
He designed Foundations of Rome.
Okay.
And the Century games.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes.
I know those. Yeah.
So he teaches at the NYU Game Center, which is an amazing game design program, and some of the classes there are for like master's level students in it. So he teaches there, and I'm friends with him, and I asked him like, who's the best student you've ever had? Because I was looking for somebody to do development for our games, and he gave me, there's been 3, he said, and he listed the 3, and one of them was this Marceline Lehman person, and I eventually found a way to hire her, and she was as advertised, so otherworldly talent. Have you guys ever seen the movie Amadeus?
Yes.
So it's a movie about Mozart, right? Mm-hmm. And it's framed through the eyes of this composer of the day named Salieri. And Salieri is a respected composer who thinks he's pretty good at making music, at composing classical music. And but then one day, this punk kid who's kind of a dip, kind of a crazy idiot in many ways, shows up, and he can play music at a level that Salieri didn't even know existed, and it was Mozart, And I kind of feel that way about Marceline, wow, this person really has a mind for this stuff. So so this game High Tide was designed by her, and then we have another game called Good Dog, which is a sort of like a speed game. Do you guys know the game Egyptian Rat Screw?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I've been writing games down the whole time.
Okay. This is like a fast speed party game, not a strategy game. So these are really light games. We have our main strategy games are about traveling, trekking the national parks, trekking the world, trekking through history. We have a lot of fans who are travelers, and so we thought we would try to make a couple of games that are actual travel games rather than games about travel.
Nice.
So we don't know if it will work, but we also want to try some things that where the amount of work and risk involved isn't as extreme as for our big productions. And these games are like that.
And are they a Kickstarter launch?
No, these will not. They will not.
These be just straight published. Straight.
We're going to straight publish them. Yeah, and we are mostly a direct-to-consumer publisher, so 90% of our game sales are online, direct from us. Although through Amazon, we sell them on Amazon.
Okay.
But we manage our own Amazon listings, and so it'll be like that probably. Yeah, and then after those, it's not totally clear. I have we have a database of ideas, which is 400 ideas long. We do. Speaking of Emerson Matsui, there is one that he has been working on that has gotten to the point where we're going to green light it.
Excellent.
But, how far ahead? Yeah. How if you got 400 ideas, how many of those are actually in some kind of development progress at any point?
Yeah, there's a small handful in consideration and just a couple that are green lit at any given time.
Yeah.
But if you don't create the database beforehand, it's really hard.
Yeah.
You need to have all the ideas together to evaluate and compare in a useful way, I think, and think about them over time as well. I've noticed that sometimes you'll have an idea and you'll think it's great, but then give it some time and later realize it's bad, or the reverse. You realize, there's something about this idea that was better than I first thought because I wasn't thinking about dimension X of that idea. So actually, we just had an idea there was an idea like that last night that I realized was probably way better than we first thought of it. So it's sort of risen up the rankings. Yeah.
Do you professionally, do you have long-term goals? You want to publish 1 game a year, 3 games every 4 years, anything like that? Or
I think Underdog wants to keep its catalog small, mostly for games. So we can talk about the ambitions in 2 ways: the company's ambitions and my own ambitions. There's a lot of overlap, but there's a couple of things that are different.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we want to be like pretty strategic about how we publish games. One thing that has distinguished us so far is we define the games we're trying to make to a degree that other companies don't, which has kept what we're making like super coherent, you know, but has also made it harder to make them. We make them in-house. We're trying to satisfy a bunch of constraints on the design all at the same time that, you know, you might not apply if you were at another publisher. So there's pluses and minuses to that, but I've really enjoyed that. For me personally, I want to make a great game before I'm dead. That's it. I mean, like when I say a great game, I want to make a game where everyone's like, there's like universal acceptance. That's a great game. Sells a zillion copies, you know, all that kind of a thing.
Right.
I suppose every designer feels that way, probably. Yeah. I don't know how much it eats at other designers, but it certainly eats at me that I haven't made that yet. So
what advice would you give to somebody who's starting out designing games?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Okay. First, don't play test bad things. So like make your first prototype, expect it's going to be awful, don't spend much time on it, play test it, and then finding out how it's awful by watching the players is where the good ideas will eventually come from.
Okay.
So just doing that over and over again.
Okay.
And like for me, that has never gone away. To this day, the very first prototype is god awful every time. I think one thing that like maybe distinguishes people who do well in this industry is they just keep iterating. They iterate more, they play test more, and they go from crap to good more often because of that. But most people start off at crap most of the time. Even the elite pros.
You'd think people would put a lot of effort into that first copy because they.
Yeah. I'm sure there are exceptions.
Just get it out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure if you watch Reiner Knizia get up at 4 a.m, he probably just craps out of beauty and then that's a cup of coffee.
I bet if we asked him that, he would say that's not what is actual reality.
But maybe I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody, right? I talked about this Marceline. I've seen her do a couple of things where I was like, wow, that is way too good, way too fast. Right. You know, that kind of thing. So that's one important piece of advice. But that's actually a common piece of advice. A lot of people get that advice. Now I'm going to give some advice that I don't see very often, but which is one of the things that's helped me most of all.
Okay.
Which is start a document somewhere that lists all of your principles for making a good game. And then every time you play test, and especially every time you publish a game, get all the feedback that comes post-publication, reevaluate those principles, iterate on them, improve to them, add to them, replace them, take ones away that are turned out to be wrong, and do that again and again and again, so that over time the principles become more accurate and more real. You know.
Okay.
And that has proven so valuable. So this game that we're publishing now, Trekking the World 2nd Edition, the early feedback is arguably the strongest early feedback we've had for a game, and I attribute a lot of that to the evolution of our principles document.
That's really useful advice. Kind of like a guiding light, but you're swinging that direction as you get the feedback.
Yeah, and important. I should explain why it's so important. We talked earlier about how games are complicated things, and each of us is like the blind man feeling his way around the elephant. Yeah. It's true of designers too. And so there are so many dimensions that have to be attended to make a great game. No human can hold them all in their head at once.
Correct.
And so getting those dimensions defined over time is really helpful to understanding what they are and internalizing them.
Yeah.
Yeah. thinking through how much actually happens and how much.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you, in your own design process, seen things either at playtest or even come across something someone said that was unintentional? Like it wasn't even part of your design, but it's come out through the playtest of a mechanic or something that's changed.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that happens at a low level all the time. I'm trying to think of like, are there anywhere there was like some kind of like come to Jesus Eureka that changed everything? I don't know. I haven't really had that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall a moment like that. I've definitely had Eureka moments. The biggest Eureka moments actually more often come when I'm studying the reactions of customers post-publication.
Okay.
So,
sure.
like, before you publish a game, you get a certain amount of feedback, but it's limited and it's biased because the playtesters who end up in your playtest groups are usually in some way biased toward what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But after you publish a game, it gets exposed to a million people who couldn't give a shit about you. You know?
It's true.
And they put comments online and they're very, forthright about what they liked and disliked. And that tidal wave of impartial feedback is amazing. That's another piece of advice I would give. Like, study the shit out of online comments.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about your first point, as from the standpoint of a playtester. If you focus too much on over developing your prototype, I'm thinking of a game that I playtested at Gen Con in the first exposure playtest hall, and we were playing the game, and the game had a lot of problems, but the quality of the production was like, so we had a moment away from the designer, and the other playtester and I were like, I think he's finished. Like, it felt like a final product, and we were like, but there's all
clearly it wasn't good enough.
But once we
this is so common,
right? So once we talked to the designer, he's like, "Oh no, this is my first draft," and we're like, "Okay. Well, now let me tell you what I think."
the wrong thing, buddy.
Right. So now I'm going to tell you what I really think. So I think that's really important. I know that's the most common feedback, but I think it's important.
Actually, that reminds me of something else that I should have said, which, I mean, this could be the most important thing of all.
Okay.
Which is like, learn to love criticism.
Yes.
I feel like I've seen a lot of designers, and it's more common among newer designers than experienced designers, but I also see it in experienced designers where it's like, if somebody says they don't like something, the designer will find a way to ignore it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really dangerous. Like, so I've worked my way into a way of being where I can, like, I'm so much more interested in the criticism. This has taken a lot of emotional work for me, but I'm more interested in the criticism. I find it more fascinating and delightful than the praise, and that has helped me get better, I think.
I think as podcasters, Gareth and I, we have conversations similar to this all the time. It's like there's just a lack of feedback, and so the absence of feedback, well, I guess we're doing everything fine, so we keep going forward. But I crave, for me personally, I crave the criticism. Tell me that I'm doing something. Tell me I'm doing something wrong, because I don't ever want to make Gareth look bad. I don't ever want to make my guests look bad.
Right.
And if no one's telling me anything, but everyone's like, that PJ is a crackpot, and I don't, you know what I mean? I need to know that. And so it's, but I'm unusual in that case. A lot of people just, it's hard to take it.
Often it's not like, if you want to be really good at something, it's like the amount of stuff that you should be criticized for to get really good is really high, right? So like maybe you're not doing anything in particular wrong, but you're also not doing anything to really stand out.
Right.
Right. This is a common thing. I the way that I've been, like, conceiving of it for myself is I imagine, like, okay, if I were a basketball player and my goal was to walk into a gym and challenge Michael Jordan to a game of one-on-one, how exacting would I need to be in my preparation to have any chance at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even assuming I was a good athlete to begin with, right? Like,
Right.
there would be zero room for error. Just the tiny little error would get the tiniest one would get exploited, and I'd lose. You know, and really, to be the best at anything is to be like that. I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so one thing I really love about working at Underdog is the guy who owns Underdog is so unafraid to tell you to your face everything that is wrong with what you're doing. Now that might sound bad or intimidating, but he doesn't say it. He's very high emotional intelligence,
right.
And but there's no holding back. There's zero filter, you know, and the standards are very high. This just happened to me today, so I've been thinking about it. I was writing something, and he was like, "This is god awful," and then he explained why it was god awful. I'm like, "Oh god, it is god awful," you know.
Right.
But you need people like that in your life, or you're never going to get to
you
where
do.
you go.
Absolutely, I agree. Could not agree more. Yeah.
It's hard to find them though. It really is, because most of us. I mean, I don't think I am as good of a feedback giver as he is, because I have inhibitions about it compared to him, you know. And I think 99% of us are like that. So there's it's really rare to find somebody who's amazing at it.
Particularly, I guess, PJ, on our list up front, we know a lot of people. So you know, depending on, there's no work relationship. It's, you know, we're just going out every week with the podcast.
Yeah.
Some people are just busy.
Yeah.
So Nick, is there anywhere else anyone can read about these topics? So in terms of emergent qualities in games, is there any
So
online that people can read?
Underdoggames.com has a blog where I post some of these essays. That's probably the main place. We also have an advisor group, which I think at least one of you is a part. So it's a private email list and Facebook group, but you can apply to it through our website. And I send emails to that, email essays, and I also, the advisor group on Facebook we use to ask lots of questions and share what's going on. And finally, lately I've been experimenting more with putting content about our games on BoardGame Geek. So one thing that has sort of bothered me about the world of like blogging, and I've been in it forever, is that like blogs die. Every blog seems to die eventually. You know? So on what platform can I put content where it's most likely to live forever? If it's written content, it's got to be something like BoardGame Geek. You know, just like, you know, if you want your video content to last forever, the best bet is YouTube. You know,
got to say, if I'm reading content, it's usually on BoardGame Geek. If I'm reading stuff,
it's a little bit frustrating because BoardGame Geek is not it's not formatted that well. So you know, most people read on mobile now, but the default font size on BoardGame Geek is too small to read on mobile. So I'm manually making my font sizes bigger on all the BoardGame Geek posts. So it's mobile friendly.
It does need a little bit of modernizing. That's all. Okay. Well, Nick, thank you for what has been a fascinating, I guess, discussion and insight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Into the company, and I guess that just thought around emergent qualities in games. It certainly made me think about my board game churn and what I do and don't play, and just considering things slightly different. I'm going to think long and hard on my drive to work about how we calculate it. Being a data guy, it has to be a way. But it has to be a way. Anything from you, PJ?
No, just thanks for coming. This is the conversation I wanted to have, and I think that it went through problems on my end, but otherwise I think this was great, and I can't thank you enough for joining us. I want to encourage more of these types of conversations, not just on the podcast, but amongst all the hobbyists in the gaming community. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great. I love hearing the sound of my own voice, so I'll always do this.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for listening, and thank Nick and thank PJ.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Oh, thanks PJ. That's one I keep forgetting.